and welcome to the show. I'm Nadia Jordana, and you are watching Where Women Talk. My guest today is author Kathryn Randall. She has a debut novel that is out and available right now, and the title is The Listening Tree. The trees know what the future holds. Doesn't that sound interesting? Let's not hang around here. Let's go meet Kathryn and learn all about this exciting new book. Welcome to the show, Kathryn.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here today.
Well, it's wonderful to have you here. You have a new debut book that's titled The Listening Tree. Get us started by talking about that book.
Well, this is my first book. I got published in 2021, and I'm 67 years old. So I was really happy to finally have something out in the world. I wanted to get a message out about an appreciation of nature that could be used for upper grade, middle school, age 12 and up. And I have a great interest in science and nature, so I kind of combined those things together and produced the book. It took me about 5 years to go through all the drafts, probably 6 or 7 complete drafts of the story. And it's not the story now that I thought it was at the beginning, but that's how things go.
They do. Books do tend to shape themselves as you go along. The subtitle is The Trees Know What the Future Holds. Talk about what that means.
So the story is about a place in Sweetwater, which is a fictional town that has a tree, a giant white oak tree in it, that 3 children throughout different time periods have developed an attachment to, and they've named it the Listening Tree. So this story takes place in 1896, and the main character is Ruth. And then there's Michael, he's from 1966, and there's Arabeth, who's from 2035. So it takes place over a time period where the children are traveling through time in the water and trees, and the trees send them messages that they need help because the climate is changing, because human beings are making decisions about the environment that sometimes aren't healthy, and it is their job to try to correct those mistakes. So the kids belong to a organization called the Society of Rainwalkers, who are human beings that can travel through time in the water and trees. And the trees know what the future holds because they can see that decisions need to be made that are environmentally sound.
Well, that is fascinating. So I'm understanding that your primary audience is young adult, but I can see that that's a book that I would find interesting. So it sounds like it's crossing generations to some degree.
Yes, I'm glad to hear you say that, because that's what I wanted. I wanted to write something that would instill a love of nature throughout generations. And, I think as grandparents, I'm a grandparent and a parent, and my stories about my experiences in nature when I was younger are much different than my grandchildren's stories about their experiences in nature. And I wanted to write something that would possibly get the generations talking about what did nature look like when we were younger? What does it look like now? How much time do you spend in it? What parts of nature are you attracted to? Things like that. So, and I've had some people that have read the book that are adults and gone out and taken a picture of a tree that meant something to them or a place that meant something to them and shared it with me. So I really like that. I think that's important.
It's drawing people out. Have you been writing all your life?
Yes, I started writing. The first thing I found that I wrote, I think, was in like 2nd grade. I still have it. So I think a lot of young people, elementary students, write poetry. And I wrote some really awful poems and kept writing. When I was in high school, I started writing science fiction, fantasy kinds of stories. And then as an adult, I've had several part-time jobs writing for newspapers. One of them was doing local interviews of people in the community. I lived in a small community in Pennsylvania. But I've always been interested in writing fiction and nonfiction. So I'm actually kind of surprised that my first book was a fiction book, because science has always been my major interest. But so I've been writing for quite a while. I actually have my first rejection letter was from 1981 from Ben Bova, who was the editor of Isaac Asimov's science fiction magazine. So I still have that rejection.
That's great. Usually people keep the acceptances, but I think something like that instills in you the passion to change that around and get that acceptance.
Right. Yep.
Well, how did you come across it's
I'm with All Things That Matter Press.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is an independent press out of the state of Maine. Which is kind of nice because I went to the University of Maine. So when they accepted the book, I was pretty excited because it's my old state alma mater and my husband's from Maine. But I made a list of small independent presses that would take manuscripts from writers that don't have an agent. And I started sending them out in batches of 20. And All Things That Matter Press was one of the first ones to receive it. And they requested the full manuscript. I sent it to them and they offered me a contract. So,
well, that is really great because, as I mentioned, it's hard for writers to find a publisher that they can be happy and comfortable with and go from point A to point B to point Z and get everything done and be happy with things. So
yes.
I'm excited for you about that.
Thank you.
Are you working on other books at this point? What does the future look like in your writing efforts?
Well, right now I'm working on the second book. So I envisioned this as a trilogy. The first book takes place in 1896, like I said, with Ruth. And the second book will take place in 1966 with Michael, who's one of the other main characters. And then, so I'm working on the second book right now. I'm actually, I think, in like the third or fourth draft of the second book. Hope to have it finished and ready to submit to the publisher by the end of this year. And then I'm also working on some nonfiction. I started a blog several years ago, and I would like to revamp that and put some of the science in the books, articles about the science in the books on the blog. So
that would be, yes, that would be very interesting because I think anyone interested in fantasy and science fiction are interested in the science behind the story, because it's just kind of a natural offshoot of that to be interested in the science of it all. So that's a great plan. I hope you do your blog soon.
Thank you. Thanks. I'd also like to start another project. I'd like to start something called the Listening Tree Project, which would be some way that people could share their experiences of nature and the special places they have in nature. I in the beginnings of trying to figure that out because I'm not real savvy on social media. It would probably have to be something on social media, which at 69, that takes a lot for me to figure that out. So hopefully I can get that going.
That's a good plan, and you're right about social media. And I suppose it's possible you could get a virtual assistant, but maybe a couple of classes would bring you about around to the basics of what you need to reach that social media audience. But certainly that is a good place to reach an awful lot of people. Would you have any kind of advice for other writers like you that are traveling along a similar path?
Well, I would say there's several important things. One thing is to have a passion and to write about what you're passionate about. A second thing would be to be really curious. So don't be afraid to look things up and research things and have questions about what it is that you're passionate about. And then, particularly if you're an older writer, or anybody, you have to have a lot of stick-to-itiveness. So it takes a lot of writing to get something into its final form. So I think Neil Gaiman said, you just write one word after another word until you have it done. And it's that easy, but it's also that hard. And I've had a lot of careers, and I do think that writing a book is the hardest thing that I possibly have ever attempted to do, because it's rewriting and developing the story. And so I would just say to people, just sit down, do it, and don't stop. Like, go to the end and keep working on it, because you will come up with something, because we're all storytellers. We all have a message that we can send to people.
That's absolutely true. And I hear that similar advice frequently. It really makes sense, because if you stick to it and you get it down on paper, like he said, it's that easy and that hard. I don't know, and I'll ask you this question. I don't know, for me as a writer, which part is harder, getting the basics of the story down in the beginning in some kind of rough shape, or the fine tuning, which is a whole nother stage of the book. Which is hardest for you?
Over the course of writing this book and writing other things, getting the first draft down to me is the hardest. And then I have really come to enjoy the rewriting. So, because I get the whole thing down and then I go back and I look at it, and there's just such a thrill when you get the exact right word that you want to have in a sentence, and it just makes sense, and you just feel like, wow, I actually wrote that, and it's good. So I like the rewriting part a lot.
We're in the same camp then as to what we feel like is hard and is easier. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you really want the audience to know about?
No, I think one thing I forgot to mention in advice would be to read. So I think that it's really, really important that people read, and not just to read what it is that you want to write about, but read a wide variety of literature and genres, and fiction and nonfiction. So every day I try to read some fiction and some nonfiction, and you learn a lot by reading how other people write. And get a notebook, write down the sentences that you like, write down the pages that you like, write down things that you observe people saying out in the world, and you can use all of that in your writing.
And one quick last question: do you make your appearance at book fairs and places like that during the summer? Well, I guess, or even during the winter months. Do you do that kind of thing?
Yes, I just did 2 appearances here in the Wisconsin area, and then in October I'm going to be at the Deep Valley Book Festival in Mankato in Minnesota, and several other smaller venues around here. So I really enjoy doing that, and I've developed some presentations to go along with the book for both adults and for upper middle grade students, to try to talk about nature and getting out in nature and the importance of it. So,
well, fantastic. It was really great to have you on the show today.
Nice to be on the show. I really appreciate talking to you. It's been fun.
Thanks for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.